Can I nominate Councillor Bell, please?
Thank you very much. We have apologies for absence from Councillor Poilievre, whom Councillor Smith is deputising. Any declaration of interest? None from me.
None from me.
And we have no minutes to consider. And the hearing procedure is as set out in your published agenda. And it should be as page 5 if you've got a hard copy available. And it is our standard agenda format, in that for each item, after introduction from licensing, then it will be for the applicant to make their case. After that, for any responsible authorities to make their case. And thirdly, for any other persons to make theirs. Other persons include towards councillors in this instance. At all of those 3 stages, only Councillor Smith and I can make questions. When we reach the stage 6 of our meeting, then there'll be an opportunity for people to put questions between each other and possibly suggest amendments to the application or conditions that might make it more acceptable, etc. And then after the discussion has been exhausted, I'll ask you for any final remarks in the same order as the initial remarks. And then we will terminate that stage of the meeting. And later today, we'll make our decisions and be sent to you either by the website or by post within about 48 hours and a final copy within a few days. Is that clear to everyone? I'm aware most of the parties who are speaking have been to our hearings before, but for those of you who don't, that's how we proceed. So, Gareth, are there any protocols about conduct of the meeting you need to remind us of?
Well, I have informed all the individuals for this first item that they should have their cameras and microphones on. And for all the individuals regarding items 7 to 9, for this item, item 6, they should have their cameras and microphones turned off.
And when you're not speaking, please turn your microphone off at all times to avoid any feedback. So I'm expecting for the first hearing, Jack Spiegler for the applicants.
Good afternoon.
Indicate here, Jack?
Good afternoon, Chair. I'm here.
Hi. Is there Amy Ketlin with you as well?
She's not joining us. It's Miss Shelley Ward is with me.
And I can see Miss Ward as well. Good afternoon.
Hi. Afternoon.
And Mr. Cantner, is he with us?
Yes.
Okay, welcome, Mr. Cantner. So with that, it's over to the licensing service to summarize the application for us, please. Stuba.
Thank you, Chair. Licensing service received an application for a premises license under Section 17 of the Licensing Act for 1 Redchurch Street for the hours stated in the agenda. The applicant stated that this is a shadow license. The old license was surrendered on 11th of August and then transferred on 14th of August. The transfer application has been approved and the old license is in place. All responsible authorities have withdrawn their representation. However, 2 other persons' reps remain. The applicant has provided supporting documents which have been circulated. I have nothing else to add, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Spiegler, it's over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll whiz through this because I'm conscious there are other people waiting to go on after us. But if there's anything that I've gone through too quickly, please do stop me and ask me to repeat it. Miss Shelley Ward, as I've mentioned, from the applicant company, is participating and happy to assist you with any questions you may have. I'm grateful to your officers for distributing my written submissions in advance, and I'm also grateful to you for reading those. So I won't take you through them line by line, but do ask you to refer to them, please. The application is for a shadow premises license, which, if granted, would be identical to the existing premises license in terms of licensable activities, hours, and conditions. The applicant is the freehold owner of the premises. In my written submissions, you'll see reference to the lovely named extreme oyster case, in which the Court of Appeal confirmed the right and ability of a freehold owner of a premises to apply for and obtain a shadow premises licence. In that case, the Court of Appeal determined that the local authority was wrong to refuse to determine an application made by a landlord for a shadow licence. And for your legal advisor's benefit, another relevant authority is the Fallen Woodhouse case, which is cited in the Extreme Oyster judgment. The application was submitted because the applicant was concerned that the outgoing premises licence holder would imperil that premises licence, and unfortunately those concerns proved warranted as the outgoing tenant surrendered the premises licence on the 10th of August. The applicant was then fortunate enough to be made aware of that by the licensing authority and has now taken steps to transfer the surrendered licence. The shadow premises licence application is still pursued, as the applicant is perfectly entitled to do so, in order to protect the licence footprint of the premises. In these unprecedented times, it is an unfortunate reality that licensed operators will go out of business and premises licenses will lapse as a result. The shadow premises license process also means that responsible freehold owners, such as the applicant, can ensure licenses are maintained on the same terms as previously approved by the licensing authority. This avoids the risk of perhaps overly ambitious operators applying for extra hours or relaxed conditions in the future. Instead, they are given a readily approved license that the licensing authority are happy with. The environmental enforcement representation was withdrawn on the 4th of August with no requirement for additional conditions. That means the conditions 33 to 38 at page 10 to 11 of your report, a number of which were included in the application anyway, fall away. There are no outstanding objections from any responsible authorities, and I invite you, please, to place weight on the lack of representation from the licensing authority, who have correctly acknowledged that the proposals would not result in a new licensed premises in the Shoreditch special policy area. The applicant therefore submits that the special cumulative impact policies LP10 and LP11 are not engaged. Even if they were engaged, there is no addition to cumulative impact since there is no new licensed premises and no variation in respect of an existing licensed premises. In my written submissions, I have also commented on the two identical interested party representations. I'm grateful to those objectors for acknowledging that there was some confusion in respect of the proposals, although with respect, I do not agree with their revised grounds for objection insofar as they are afforded the right to revise their objections. The applicant has written to those objectors on two separate occasions with an invitation to engage and clarify the application, but unfortunately those invitations have gone unanswered, and we're asking you now to determine the application as a result. I ask you therefore to place appropriate weight on the interested parties' concerns accordingly. Importantly, the initial and primary concern about a new, or to quote them, another licensed premises in Shoreditch has been clarified and addressed. The objectors have raised points relevant to the COVID-19 pandemic, and I've also made submissions in that respect in my written submissions. And at risk of repeating myself, there is no additional licensed premises, and therefore there can be no addition to the cumulative impact. In any event, the pandemic has and will continue to result in materially lower levels of cumulative impact in Shoreditch, particularly when compared to levels at the time of your last cumulative impact assessment. To summarise, Chair, the applicant is a responsible landlord who has taken steps to ensure an incoming tenant has a premises licence on the same terms and conditions as previously approved by the licensing authority. For the reasons I have given, there will be no adverse impact on the licensing objectives, nor any addition to cumulative impact, which is the key test under your policy. We invite you to grant the application accordingly, and in doing so, you can signal your support to those businesses playing their part in the responsible revival of the Shoreditch economy. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Can you just repeat for me what you said in respect of conditions 33 to 38?
Yes, Chair. At pages 10 to 11, the licensing authority case officer helpfully included conditions proposed by the environmental enforcement officer in their representation. However, their representation has been withdrawn with no requirement for additional conditions, partly because it's a shadow license, but also partly because a number of their conditions were already included in the operating schedule. So if you are minded to grant, I would suggest there is no need to impose conditions 33 to 38 because nobody's asking for them anymore.
Okay, I understand your point of view on that.
Chair, do we have a copy of that confirmation from Environmental to say that they're no longer requiring those conditions? Or just can the licensing officer confirm that that's correct? Because I haven't seen that particular memo.
I've got a copy of it, perhaps unorthodox, but I could email it.
Was it actually given to any other party apart from yourself?
It was emailed, I think from memory, on the 4th of August to myself and Sanaria Hussain of the licensing authority.
Right. Would you be able to send it to the licensing officer or to, I don't know, if you want to send it to me and then I can pass it on?
Yeah, I'll send it to you now.
Okay, that's fine. Just so we have a record of it. Thank you so much.
On the wider issue, this is something we're going to treat as a new application because it is a new application and it's a choice your clients made to submit this and pursue it. Now, that does not mean that the issues about cumulative impact are engaged, but on the other hand, we note this is an application for premises that exists, and therefore it is up to someone else to make the case for any additional cumulative impact. But we're clear that those issues are engaged for us anyway. Gilbert, do you have any other questions at this point?
No, I'm fine, thank you. It's all quite clear so far.
Okay, thank you. With no responsible authorities, Mr. Cantor, it's over to you to make your case.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Bell, I have to apologize that I'm actually going to start with a question. Is it the case that this is being considered as a new application or that it's a shadow license? Because I'll actually agree with the first presentation that it does fundamentally make a difference.
My statement was we're treating it as a new license application.
Okay, all right.
Which we understand it's a shadow license.
It's a shadow license, all right. Because I actually, I understand the case law. I agree with the first presentation on the oyster case is that to the extent it's a shadow license following an existing license, then certainly under the oysters, the strong presumption is that it would be issued. I don't disagree with that. Unfortunately, we were told in writing that the existing license had lapsed, so therefore we viewed it as a new license, an entirely new license. But I suppose I understand that not to be the case. To the extent that it is being treated as a shadow license, we would assume that it would be granted. But I suppose on that basis, the one thing I would want to make clear is the impact and really the change in baseline in what we view on a go-forward basis. The one thing that we have seen as residents, and we can actually see the venue from our window, is that we know the impact of the nighttime economy on residents, on neighbors, on the council, on the police, etc. We don't need to repeat it. And it's empirical. Crime in Shoreditch was down 70% beginning in March. Crime in Shoreditch is beginning to tick back up. And so it's our view that we will be making the case very strongly over the coming months. And when we talk about cumulative impact, it's not cumulative impact on the worst moment in Shoreditch's history, but rather on the present scenario. So to the extent it's a new license, that it needs to be considered in that context. And our fundamental issue is not with the landlord, but it's that there's no possible way of knowing the landlord. And that in any new premises license application, one of the considerations is the ability for the applicant to meet the licensing objectives. And obviously, when it's a disembodied landlord making a new application, rather than necessarily a shadow application. But a new application, there's simply no way of knowing that. There's absolutely no way of knowing whether the plans or operations will ever meet the licensing objectives. And so we would argue that both under the special policy area and just actually the very terms of the Licensing Act, that a blanket application like this as a new application should actually be rejected. But to the extent it's a shadow license, I would actually agree that the presumption is that it would be issued. That's really all I'd say, is we know that we're living in a very different world today than we were 8 months ago. Our lives all of our lives have changed, and that the new normal is the baseline rather than the days in which we had shootings, stabbings, vomitings, and violence outside our front door. So thanks for the time, and I hope that helps.
Thank you. It does. Clearly, the situation is complicated. We know a license was surrendered and then was reactivated and is in place with this property. And this is a new application for a license you intend to use as a shadow license. And we have no problems with the concept of shadow licenses. We understand it, and we know we're going to get some more. But Mr. Cantor, what you have to do, haven't really done yet, is make a case that this particular new application, if granted, would add additional cumulative impact.
Fine. Well, I can do that very simply.
Without any capacity or any extra hours.
Yeah. So I can do that very simply, which is the age-old speech about the impact of the nighttime economy on Shoreditch, the addition of additional peoples here, and the addition of additional alcohol. So the addition of an additional licensed venue, whether it's a restaurant or a bar, inevitably attracts more people, puts more people on the street. And we know there's a direct correlation between the number of people on the street and the violence, safety to children, health and safety, as well as all the various other license conditions. Specifically, sorry, I don't have them in front of me, but I would primarily point to health and safety of children who, at its worst, in Shoreditch, quite literally couldn't go out their front doors after 8 p.m. on a Thursday, Friday, or Saturday night because it simply wasn't safe. So adding an additional venue to the current baseline increases the risk of health and safety to children. Full stop.
But I think we're all agreed that we're not adding an additional venue.
So sorry, I apologize because I'm being very technical, but that's where I'm a little bit confused. I would understand that if this is treated as a shadow license under Oyster, it's not an additional venue. But I would also think that if the license had been surrendered, and therefore there's no license in place, that this is not a shadow license, and it is a new license, and therefore an additional venue.
No, just to clarify, and we were confused about this earlier today as well. The license was surrendered, then it was reactivated within the legal period by the landlord.
So the venue currently has an active license.
So that, contrary to what it says in paragraph 3.1 of the report, the license was reactivated by the landlord, and the old license is also in force, and they're applying for this license as well.
I would agree. It's not adding an additional. Yeah, so I would agree. It's not adding an additional venue because it is a shadow license within the meaning of Oyster, and the presumption would be that it would be granted. I would just simply, in that case, highlight to the applicant and their counselors that that there is an impact. That nobody should be so self-delusional that they're doing anybody a good deed here. That's all.
Okay, Councillor Smith, do you have any questions, Mr. Cantor?
No, well, just on the waste issue, because I know there's been some complaints about waste. I mean, you say you can see the venue from your window. I mean, in terms of the sort of waste issues that the environmental health team brought out, I mean, do you want to expand on any of those issues at all?
I could, if you'd like, which is in particular relation to this venue and the previous operator, Andina. Andina was particularly bad about the times that they left their waste out. It's a rather narrow footpath directly in front of the venue. It's narrow and it's incredibly busy. There are 2 to 3 other busy venues and literally right on the same corner, Brat and Smoking Goat. And so the piles of recycling and the bags that were left out at times that I assume were not their appointed times often were pretty much a big Friday night at 8 p.m. Big piles of recycling, bags of and big piles of cardboard or an obstruction. So it's something that's worth paying attention to, but I'm sure any good operator would pay attention to that.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
And it's worth pointing out that there are conditions already on the license which do have to refer
Yeah.
to that.
Yeah,
Amanda,
just a quick thing in case it's not been covered is given the current COVID restrictions, etc., there's going to be obviously a reduced amount of footfall probably in the area. Does the impact issue still apply then from what you're saying, Mr. Cantor?
That's actually a really, really good question, because just based on our anecdotal observations, the amount of footfall, ironically, is not lower, because people are spending more time out on the streets. So the interesting thing is, if you roll down Old Street at 9 p.m. on a Friday, the street is as busy as it's ever been. The interesting thing is that the venues are not as full.
Okay,
so
they
in the current
can't.
environment, and maybe just because it's warm, who knows? The traffic, visible foot traffic has not got down. Although empirically, obviously, the numbers of people there are obviously lower.
So would you say that this premises is because they're going to have a less numbers of people coming in? Is your opinion still that they'll be adding to the cumulative impact in the area?
So I'm making a rather academic argument, which says the current baseline is, say, 3 on a scale of 1 to 10. We're adding another venue; it's going to go up from 3 because right now there's nobody there, and if it was the case that there was no license, then it stays at 3. But I actually think, and I can concede that it fundamentally is not new license because the license is in place. I personally am not trying to assert any disingenuous grounds that overall this shadow license can or should be rejected.
and is my understanding correct in that this current license and the one applied for the shadow license have no outside areas as part of the license area?
That's correct. It's on an incredibly tight, busy corner. I have no idea what the current license's smoking requirements are, but there's no outside area, and they've never had any kind of area roped off for
No, there's a plan
smokers.
on page 26 of our published agenda. Ms. Ward or Mr. Bigler, I can just confirm you don't have a intention to use an outside area at the moment?
I'll perhaps hand you over to Ms. Ward, but that's certainly my understanding.
Sorry, could you just repeat that?
There is no outside area attached as part of the licensable area on the current plan on the license,
No,
and you don't intend immediately to change that.
no, we don't.
Okay. I have nothing else to ask on this one. Councillor Smith, do you have anything else?
Yeah, I'm happy, Councillor Bell. Thank you very much.
Ms. Nouth, is there anything you think we should raise we haven't raised? I think your microphone's off.
Sorry, I do apologise. Sorry. No, I think we've covered everything. Thank you.
Okay. Unfortunately, the format here. Well, sorry. First of all, I should ask for any final remarks. Spigler, do you want to say anything finally?
Thank you, Councillor Bell. Just very briefly, I'm happy that I agree with an objector, Mr. Cantor. I'm grateful again for his comments. The applicant does agree with his comments that the application is not making an addition to impact in Shoreditch because it's a shadow license application, and again agreeing with his other comments that under extreme moisture there is a presumption to grant an application like this, and I'm grateful for that clarification. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cantor. Any final remarks?
No.
Councillor Smith, anything final from you?
No, I'm happy, content. Thank you very much.
Okay, unfortunately, under this format, we have to make our decisions later and return. If we'd been in a normal format, we could have come back in probably a few minutes in this case and given you our decision. I may be breaking all the rules, but I think it's highly likely we will approve this.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Smith.
Thank you.
You'll get written confirmation within a period. Okay, thank you, everyone. And if people for that hearing can leave us if you wish to.
Thank you.
If you wish to.
Thank you very much.
Okay, everyone ready to go straight on to the next one without needing a break? The next 3 in effect, yes?
Yes. Yep.
So if people could tell us they're here. I'm expecting Gary Grant. If you could briefly put your microphone on, say you're here. Mr. Grant, is that you?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, can do. Mr. Newman with you?
I'm hoping Andy Newman will be with me, Nathan G, Andrew Atkins, and Tony Westbrook, and Roanna Fawcett.
So is Andy Newman there?
He certainly was.
Yep, he was. I've got him down, Chair, as being present. Well, he was present at the start of the meeting.
Yeah, I've got 2 A signs for some reason.
Yeah.
I'll text him now.
Sorry. Yes, I am. Excuse me.
Oh,
Yes, I am
Andy.
here, Chair.
Good, good.
I can hear him. Andy, is that you?
Yeah, it's me. So I'm having some technical problems with the mic.
Sure, and we have Nathan G.
Present.
And Tony Westbrook. Tony Westbrook. Hello.
Yes, I'm here, but I'm afraid my camera is not functioning at the moment. So, but I am able to hear, and my microphone is working.
Okay, good. Just checking. I can see you now. And Roanna.
Yeah, here and present.
And Andrew Atkins.
Here present.
Aye. And in objection, we have Mr. Chewett from licensing.
I'm here and present, Chair. Thank you.
And Councillor Nick Sharman.
I'm here as well.
Okay, those are the parties I'm expecting to hear from. So we have got, just mentioned, we've got a detailed late submission from the applicants, 2 bundles. And I'm hoping everyone's had a chance to have a look at.
Yes.
Everyone has sight of those. And with that, if Struba, you could please introduce the report, and also just to note, sorry, we are effectively taking 3 items together on this one because it makes no sense to do it otherwise. So we have
Councillor,
3 items.
I'm so sorry for interrupting. Can I confirm you've received the additional letter from the LLDC of the 18th of August?
We certainly did, yeah.
I'm grateful.
We've seen it.
Thank you, Councillor.
Struba, could you please introduce the 3 applications?
Thank you, Chair. Licensing Service received 3 applications for a premises license under Section 17 of the Licensing Act for Hackney Bridge for 3 different blocks for the hours stated in the agenda. The licensing authorities and other person representation from Big Board councillors remain. The applicant has provided additional supporting documents in addition to the submission made when the applications was made. A letter of the support for the application from the LLDC has been provided, which has been circulated as well. I have nothing else to add. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Mr. Grant, it's over to you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor, I'm aware it's a general rule of 5 minutes per application. Would you mind? I'm sorry?
You can vote up to 15.
All right, I'll do my best. In addition to what I have to say, any operational matters, questions, Nathan G and Roanna Fawcett from Makeshift or Hackney Bridge are here to ask questions, and Mr. Westbrook from LLDC, as well as Mr. Andrew Atkins from the master developers of the entire residential mixed-use development is here, and I know would like to say a few words to assist the subcommittee. The crux of our submissions are, I hope, helpfully summarised in the written submissions that I made, and I know you've got in front of you. So I don't intend to cover every point I've already written down in there, because I know you would have considered them. If I could make some general points before I move on to the specifics. This is a significant opportunity for the area, and it will hugely benefit the neighbouring boroughs, including Hackney. Makeshift have a proven track record of doing what they hope to do in the Queen Elizabeth Park, both in Peckham Levels in Southwark, as well as in Brixton in Lambeth. This has been over 3 years in the making, this application, through the planning feasibility stage, through consultations with the local community, which have been numerous, and other stakeholders over the past 3 years. And this license application is the final piece of the jigsaw to enable this project to continue, but it's an essential part of that jigsaw puzzle. Now, extensive discussions, engagement with the police and both of your environmental health teams have led to a complete set of agreed hours and conditions in this case that you will find in the supplementary pack at pages, from page 2 right through to page 15. Now that has been a very carefully crafted set of bespoke conditions for each of the 3 units, which I'll call A, B, and C, and each unit has a different use. And that's all explained in the presentation, which is in your additional evidence bundle. But just to summarize those, Block A is a pub and 2 restaurants. The 2 restaurants take up about half of the square meterage of Block A, and indeed there is a full restaurant condition in relation to the 2 restaurants. So about half of Block A is subject to a full restaurant condition. You don't need to turn it up now, but that's condition 13 on the agreed conditions. Block B is a food hall and mezzanine, and the restaurant condition 13 of those applies to the entire Block B. Block C doesn't have a restaurant condition because it's not a restaurant. That is a multi-use event space and cocktail bar. And that is the space where most of the community-led projects and events will take place. Now, planning permission has already been granted for this project, and you'll find the planning permission within the supplementary papers at page 34 onwards. Now, you're in a position now that you have the professional expert guardians of both the crime and disorder objective, the police, and the public nuisance objective, your 2 environmental health teams, who now approve of this application in its revised form. The hours proposed are less than the hours in the original application in deference to discussions with those who have made representations, but they try and address the sweet spot between properly recognizing the potential impact of this venue on its surroundings and residents and the financial viability of this project. Now, there is a great deal, and I've summarized it all in my written submissions, there is a great deal of community aspect to these 3 applications in the forms of free use of the event space for up to 25% of the time. So that's the Block C. But of course, that all has to be paid for. When you allow a space to be used for free for a quarter of the time, in order to make it financially viable, the operator needs to be able to make money to do it. And the hours that we've proposed that have been agreed to by the police and by environmental health, they hit that sweet spot. The objections to this case currently come from Mr. David Tuitt of licensing, and I believe that's simply a policy objection rather than specifics, but I'll wait to hear what Mr. Tuitt has to say. And the ward councillors represented by Councillor Sharman here today. Now, the councillors have asked for core hours, which is far below even what was granted on planning. Core hours, if that were the decision, would not enable financially the extent of the community works that the operator wishes to do to happen. It simply doesn't happen. It doesn't make it financially viable. So I want to address, please, if I may, your core policy on hours and why we say it doesn't have to be an exception to policy. We're not in a special policy area, but just addressing your core hours LP3 in this way. And I've set this out in my written submissions. at paragraph 25 onwards. But LP3 sets the core hours, but then very importantly, it adds this narrative within your licensing policy. Later hours may be considered where the applicant has identified any risk that may undermine the promotion of the licensing objectives and has put in place robust measures to mitigate those risks. And what we say here, more than in most cases, is there are extraordinarily robust mitigating measures in place that already satisfy the police and your 2 environmental health teams who made representations in this case. Now, to summarise those robust measures, can I give you, if you perhaps turn to paragraph 28 of my written submissions, it's at page 119 of the supplementary papers. Now, given the time I have, I can't go into the details of these, but we can certainly ask questions. But you will discover that within our supplementary bundle, you will find these robust measures. You will find, firstly, the travel plan that's in the supplementary at pages 68 to 96, that details in great detail how people are likely to disperse from these sites. And that appears to be, in fact, it's the only concern raised in the councillor's representation. Will people disperse straight through residential areas and have an adverse impact such that you should reduce this to core hours? In short, and I'm going to bring in Nathan G in a moment, if I may, to explain, it is highly unlikely that any great quantity of people will disperse into the residential areas. We are close to Hackney Wick Station, we are close to Stratford Station and the Jubilee line with its 24-hour line on the Friday, Saturday weekends. We expect most people will be local, so they will walk or they will cycle. But what I'm going to do, and also I should add that within the reports before you is the suggestion that street marshals will be put into strategic positions. So if you have a particularly busy event, for example, we are not simply going to leave hundreds of people to march through screaming through residential areas. There will be street marshals within at strategic points in order to keep things orderly and standard. And indeed, this premises is different from Pop Brixton and Peckham Levels only in one way. The other 2 are far more embedded in their local residential communities than this site. I mean, they are literally on the top of residential areas, whereas there is a slight distance across the canal from this particular site in Hackney Bridge. And you will have seen, I hope, the letters from the head of regeneration, both for Southwark and for Lambeth, that are both within your papers. We've included them. I've summarised them at paragraph 11 of my written submissions. But both those heads of regeneration for those 2 councils have both lauded what these operator has done for their communities, but most importantly has confirmed that there have been no licensing issues, not by chance, but because of the operational measures my clients take. So what I'm going to do with your permission is just briefly bring in Nathan G to explain to you why he is confident that his customers are not going to disperse noisily into the residential areas. So could I please bring Nathan G in?
Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Chair and Committee, for your time this afternoon. We really appreciate the time that you take to have these hearings during this this challenging time. So we operate, as you've heard from Gary, both Pop Brixton and Peckham Levels, and we are looking to do so. It's a community-based project. Just to give you a synopsis of what we are doing, we've done an extensive community engagement across the period of the development, which you can see through the planning pack, which is part of your supplementary agenda pack. The results of this have actually informed what we've done with the development, in that, for example, we have embedded a convenience store and cafe and a light industrial units, specifically on the basis of that community engagement, and we provide supported space, which is lower than market rent for people that could not otherwise get onto that commercial property ladder. So the idea is embedded in our leases, 70% or more of the tenants need to be local members from the local borough. So that means that all of these local businesses have an opportunity to acquire lower than market rent space with a view to them being able to develop their business over time. And we are only a meanwhile use space. We have 12 years in situ. And post that 12 years, the idea is that they would move into the commercial spaces that the landlords or the bid developers are developing, so that we...
Nathan, I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but given the restrictions on time, could you please address the question I asked you about how you will prevent your customers going into the residential streets and making a noise? Why don't you think they're going to disperse into residential areas?
Great, okay, thanks, Gary. Apologies, I was giving some further background. On the dispersal map, as you can see on page 164, the dispersal map is actually the same map for all three applications. We have SIA security people denoted by the green dots throughout the site. They will be directing people away from the site up towards past the copper box, towards the cab rank and bus stop, and across Queen Elizabeth Park to the Jubilee line, which is obviously runs 24 hours now. And then also across the bridge to Hackney Overground. They directly across the bridge is a number of bars and restaurants who have similar licensing hours, and there is also a lot of warehouse area straight across that bridge. So we firmly believe that with the use of these marshals and guards as denoted by that dispersal policy, we will disperse crowds with minimal noise and impact on residents throughout the time.
Thank you, Nathan. Now, Councillor, what I'm going to do now, because it seems that the real issue, the only matter that's really an issue, are core hours on the basis of people disturbing residents. So on that point, you will immediately know that the very nearest residents to this site will, when it's complete, be the residential development in Hackney Bridge, or Clarnico Quay as it was previously called. Now, the master developer who will be responsible for making sure residents are not disturbed is EW&S, represented by Andrew Atkins. So I'm going to bring him in to say a few words about why he is confident that his residents, who will be the nearest residents, why they won't be disturbed by this project. Andrew.
Thanks very much, Gary. Thank you, Chair. So I'm Andrew Atkins from Eastwick and Sweetwater Projects. I'm the Development Director for the project. I've been working on this particular scheme for 5 years and spent 3 years of that time working to bring the Hackney Bridge development forward with Makeshift, who we feel are an exceptional good fit for our community objectives here and the place that we are trying to create. We are building our very first phase of the development at the moment with 300 homes to be delivered from this autumn onwards. And the closest building to Hackney Bridge is our market sale building. So we are putting we're putting residents who will need to be persuaded and satisfied of the controls that we have in place in that building immediately adjacent to Hackney Bridge. We're going to do that through transparency. We believe the people that want to come to Eastwick and Sweetwater and to live here will be attracted by the rounded offer that Hackney Bridge is bringing to this place. We've worked long and hard with Clarnico Quay in terms of their management controls over the space, the environmental controls that they're putting into the building fabric, and the environmental controls that we obviously have in our building to achieve excellent sustainability standards, noise control, overnight controls. We are a joint venture formed by or between Balfour Beatty and Places for People. Places for the People are a nationally operating social landlord and regeneration company. We have 197,000 properties in ownership and management. So we are very experienced in managing major mixed use and residential communities. And from that perspective, our management team have been instrumental in negotiating the service agreement with Makeshift to ensure that all of these specific controls are in place. So it's about transparency, it's about honesty for us, and also relying on some very nuanced technical controls that we have in place between ourselves and Makeshift.
Thank you. And could I finally say this, Councillor, that the hours proposed, which are different for Block A's, B and C, have been very carefully thought out by the police, by EH and by my client to specifically ensure there is a staggered set of closing times, because that's what assists with the gradual dispersal rather than the mass exodus in this case. And we hope that the level of engagement with the community over the last 3 years might explain why there hasn't actually been a single individual resident who has objected to this application, something that's highly unusual when you've got an application of this size. So, councillors, there's lots more I've said in my written submissions. I'm about to run out of time. So I think perhaps the best way forward might be for me to end my submissions here, but to deal with any of the questions that you may have with your colleague, and I'll delegate operational matters to those who know more about it than I do.
Yes, thank you very much for keeping the time very well. Just two things immediately from me. The first one, I did notice the reference to street marshals in your covering summary. How are these to be conditioned?
It hasn't been proposed as a condition because it's actually already contained in the planning documents, and I can show you where in just a moment. Yes, if you look please at the additional, the supplementary documents at page 103. So that is the site management plan, which is there as part of the planning and the service level agreement. So that's embedded in planning. So at 103, there is a, do you see the letter E? Page 103, supplemental papers.
Indeed, yeah.
Paragraph E, you'll see that deals with a minimum of one marshal on duty Friday and Saturdays after 12:30. But that will be subject to a risk assessment by my clients. So in other words, if you have a particularly busy night expected, they will put on however many street marshals are needed. So what you may wish to do by way of condition is, although it's already effectively an embedded planning condition, you could indicate that there shall be one street marshal on duty on Friday and Saturday nights after 12:30, and at all other times to be risk assessed, and that would ensure that however many street marshals are needed will be on site. And that was the agreement of the planning authority.
Thank you, that's helpful. Of course, we want a separate licensing condition on that matter.
Yes.
And wouldn't overlap with planning. My second question is, it's about the operation of what you're calling Unit C, the cocktail bar and event space. Am I right in interpreting in cocktail bar would be open all of the time, most nights?
I'm going to ask Nathan to deal with that.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, that's correct. The cocktail bar will be open all of the time, and the event space will be open during events, or again, as Gary alluded to before, it'll be 25% of the time it'll be free for community use.
So effectively it'll be a second pub in a way.
I think it's definitely more of a cocktail bar than a pub, as if you were trying to classify it specifically. But yeah, it will be a supplementary to the event space, and the way it would generate revenue is through higher footfall during event times, but it will be open to the public throughout.
Okay, that clarifies it. Councillor Smith, any points at this stage?
Well, yes, please, Chair. Just on Block C, as it's a cocktail bar, I note that that's the kind of that's going to be one of the venues that is open the longest in terms of the hours. Why might that be the case?
Again, it was Nathan here. It's supplementary to the event space. So the idea is it feeds off the event space in terms of the higher footfall hours, and it facilitates the revenue generation by allowing people to have a drink before the show and move in and out there in between performances, etc. So it really it's seen as a symbiotic relationship between the two.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I'm happy to leave further questions to the discussion phase.
Ms. Niles, there's something you wanted
I
to...
was going to ask you about the capacity of this cocktail bar as opposed to the other areas. Is that going to have like more, or is it all the same under the same capacity figure?
Nathan, what's the what do you anticipate the capacity, or Rowana?
I just have to find the capacities. Sorry, 1 second.
I think the capacity of C is 626, I believe. I mean, the capacity issues is that's an area that we could maybe discuss later, Chair, or if you want to take it up now, it's up to you.
Does the applicant agree with your 626 figure?
626, I think, is the entire Unit C, isn't it?
Yeah,
that is
percentage of that is like to be the cocktail bar use.
That's what I thought. That's what I thought. It was a separate section, possibly. Yeah.
Well,
so, and
sorry, I didn't mean.
Is that all going to be vertical drinking as well?
That is correct. The two units are joined, so it will be the one tenant who's taking that space. So it'll be a total capacity for the building, which they will be accountable for, and the entire space is not separately licensed. So we're going to have one tenant in there who will do the events and the cocktail bar.
To confirm, the bar space of that block, the capacity for there is 60 persons.
Yeah, 60.
Six.
Set by the fire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So 60 for the cocktail bar alone. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's helpful.
Yep.
Councillor Smith, any other questions?
No, I'm happy to wait until later.
Mr. Stewart, want to make representations, please?
Thank you very much, Chair. I will keep it brief so we can get to the discussion phase. But I just want to start by saying that I can actually vouch for what Mr. Grant said in his opening submission, that the application or this scheme, this project does date back some time. I looked through my emails. The first contact I had about this was actually May 2017, when it was just at very, very early stages of planning. And then I met with Mr. G and Andy Newman in November 2019, and I then did a site tour during, when the site was quite well built out in February this year, 21st of February this year. So we have been kept informed as this project has developed, but as has been already referred to today. There is the issue of hours on some of the particular blocks. So A and C. I mean, Block B is within policy hours, as we can see, but the proposed activities for blocks A and C are just slightly outside of the hours as set out in the council's policy now, following the amendment to those hours. I would add that licensed activity and some licensed venues are in this area already. So obviously we have here East Estate. The premises that are on Canal side, Copper Box Arena is licensed, and then over the other side of the river on Wallace Road, we have a number of licensed premises there over the canal, but some of those uses are temporary. We believe in the future they will be redeveloped, some of those sites. So I've just got some traffic here, but yeah, essentially, that's where we are from a licensing authority point of view. Just the hours on blocks A and C, which are slightly outside of policy.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Smith, anything questions?
Yeah, just to clarify, just just to get the hours kind of specifically right here, in the supplementary documentation, page 112, pages 113, on the altered hours, there's no mention. It just mentions licensable activities. It doesn't mention late night refreshment in any of those hours. So I'd just like you to clarify: is there a distinction between late night refreshment and selling alcohol, or
Can I explain that, since it's my document, Councillor?
Yep.
Councillor, late night refreshment is, of course, one of the licensable activities.
Yep.
Essentially, we're cutting off the licensable activities half an hour before closing,
Yep.
with the sole exception of late night refreshment. And that's so people can have a coffee or tea as they might be winding down.
Okay.
That's to allow.
Yeah. That's an issue that I think we might explore. Most venues tend to they have a sort of rest period before they close, half an hour before.
Yes, that's exactly what this is. So all the
Okay.
sale of alcohol, all the regulated entertainment, the music, that all stops half an hour before. And then if someone would like a cup of tea, perhaps if they're waiting for a taxi,
Yeah.
it allows them to do that. And that assists with the winding down period. I don't know if Roanna or Nathan want to explain how that assists the operation to wind down. Anything to add?
I think you've captured it there, Gary. That's exactly right. It also gives people time to disperse. So again, along with that, the staged closing scenario, people, not everybody coming out at once. It gives them half an hour to finish on site.
Normally, we would expect opening times to be half an hour after stopping of all licensable activities. I don't see how you could. First of all, I'm not convinced you need a late refreshment license to serve tea and coffee, but we normally expect people to wind down by stopping all licensable activities and then expecting people to leave. If you continue to serve them anything, it helps encourage them to hang around.
Councillor, can I just say that if serving a cup of coffee or tea in the last half an hour is the deal breaker, we will forgo that privilege.
That's helpful. As I say, we would normally expect all licensable activities to stop and then the half hour winding down time to be after all those have stopped.
Yes.
That's very helpful.
Yeah.
Mr. Stewart, do you have anything else to add at this stage?
No, not at this stage, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Sharman, do you want to make your representations?
Thank you, Chair. The sort of core issue, I think, here is that we've got a development here that was originally talked to us as a set of community workshops or community-oriented workshops that would build activities on the particularly around the artistic community in the Hackney Wick area, and on that basis they received a lot of support. What we're seeing here is two, I think, unfortunate things, which is the community is being asked to subsidise through an impact on their environment to pay for a very considerable entertainment centre. And I think that is unfortunate. And that's been also an issue because there's been no engagement, despite all the talk about local consultation. And I have to be fair, there have been a lot of discussion about this development over the last 2-3 years. But local councillors were never asked about or talked to about these hours. And I find that disappointing that we as councillors were not involved in a discussion over this. Our core concern, I think, is the impact that spilling out up to 600 people will have on the main approach to Waterden Road down to the pickup points that the applicants have talked about. That's one issue. those developments are now well advanced, and I would expect to see residents in there very shortly. And those are not simply, as Mr. Atkins has said, people looking for a kind of added value, a kind of Shoreditch experience. This is an area where we're hoping to get families, a whole range of different people into this development. And I have to say, it's very sad to me that Mr. Atkins does not recognise, has been so unequivocal as landlord in backing this, without saying, actually, there's a real conflict here and we have to manage that. And I have to say the same thing about the LLDC, who have given, again, their total support to this development without recognising that, as in many of these situations, there's a balance to be struck. And I have to say, I think Mr. Grant has put it well, they do recognise there is a real development. And I find the supporters in the form of the landlords and the LLDC disappointing that they've not recognised that. The issue too, apart from the Waterton Road access point, is that people will be moving, as been recognised, across the bridges into Hackney Wick Station, and this will be increasingly, it isn't at the moment, it is, as they've said, at the moment a largely warehouse route. It will not be very shortly. The whole of Hackney Wick is being transformed at the moment into a mixed-use residential area. So it's disingenuous to claim that there won't be residents affected by this. And I have to say, we feel that we're representing future residents in a way that neither the landlords nor the LLDC seem able to do, and speaking for them. Now, the final point I'd like to make is that the transport dispersal, around transport dispersal, the wind down of local transport, I think, by the way, this will be largely external people who will require either taxis or tubes. And certainly for those coming out late, there will not be that much public transport around. So I think there will be quite a lot of a movement and people looking for cabs and so on. So we are really looking for a proper dispersal management. And I find it, again, very disappointing, the point you've made, Chairman, about asking Mr. Grant about this commitment to transport marshal, the street marshals. They're only available for a certain time, highly conditional, no commitment to be made at other times, and it's not part of the conditions. And the reference to planning conditions, I don't think is a sufficient. We've got to see a better way of ensuring dispersal operates. And I would please say to the applicants, you've done quite well on talking to local people. Why leave us as local councillors out of this key discussion when we're trying to represent not just the present residents, but the future residents? Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Smith, first of all, do you have any questions to Councillor Sharman?
Yes, I mean, just in terms of, I mean, when did they ever contact you at all?
Yeah, oh yes, they were making their pitch about this, as I said at the beginning, about a development that will be about workshop developments, reflecting the needs, increasing needs of the Hackney Wick cultural community for low cost premises, and we very much welcomed that and saw this as a real kind of hub, if you like, an activity hub. We didn't see it, and nor was it represented to us as an entertainment centre with a few workshops attached, and the price of those workshops being that we should have a lot of drinking and entertainment hanging off it. So we were consulted, we were talked to, but in my view, not in the way that's been described by Mr. Grant.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, in discussion stage now, Mr. Grant, I think it would only be fair if I allowed you to respond to what we've just heard. And you might want to turn your mic on.
think if there's ever a slogan that sums up 2020, it's "I'm sorry, you're on mute." Right. Firstly, to address Councillor Sharman's point, as I understand it, I've only very recently been involved in this case. There have been efforts in the recent weeks and months to invite the councillors on site precisely to discuss the hours and what was there. Now, I appreciate during COVID that's not always practical, but there have been efforts. Indeed, I've sent several emails to Councillor Kennedy, who we understood was taking the lead on this, and I know Mr. Newman has sent several emails and attempted to phone Councillor Kennedy precisely so we could discuss these hours after agreement was reached with police and environmental health. So I'm sorry if that information wasn't forwarded to Councillor Sharman, but it wasn't due to...
No, Mr. Grant, this is disingenuous. These approaches came within the last month to 6 weeks, when you had already, as you've just said, concluded discussions elsewhere. A proper community consultation starts with local groups, local councillors, then moves on to other issues. So you've got it the wrong way round, actually. Very late to come. And I do acknowledge we've now got a meeting set up, but typically we've only been able to arrange it after this hearing. So I think it's late and inadequate would be the way I'd sum it up.
All right, I don't intend to lock horns with you, Councillor Sharman, but efforts were made to speak to councillors about this. Secondly, there is, of course, Hackney's head of regeneration has been on the whole planning committee, steering committee for this project. So they were fully aware, and the council were fully appraised of what was happening with ours at an early stage. The other point I'd like to make is this, that street marshals, we're very happy to offer that condition within a licence. And what we can do, if it meets with your favour, is offer a minimum of 2 street marshals to be employed on Friday and Saturday. And can I suggest that's done from midnight instead of midnight 30? I've said that without instructions. Nathan, is that acceptable? Yes.
Could you repeat that for me, please?
Yes, there shall be a minimum of 2 street marshals employed to assist with the quiet dispersal of customers from midnight on Friday and Saturday nights. On all other occasions, the number of street marshals are to be subject to a risk assessment.
Okay, thank you.
So yes, so those are the points. Is there anything in particular that perhaps I can assist Councillor Bell or Councillor Smith with?
Chair, is it okay to come in?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, well, just going back to the sort of capacity of all the different venues. I mean, we're talking about an awful lot of people here. If every single unit was full, I've got 710 for Block A, 849 for B, and 626 for C. Now, if everything's working at full capacity, that's an awful lot of people to be trying to get out of that area late at night. Can maybe you just speak to that a little bit, because we're talking about nearly I don't know, is it nearly 2,000 people?
Yeah, I'll bring Nathan G in. I should add, in fact, there is a dispersal policy was submitted together with the original application.
Just on the point, just before you come in there, if you don't mind, 2 restaurants and a pub for venue A.
Yes.
710 capacity. Can you just talk about the capacity for each restaurant and the capacity for the pub individually? That would be quite useful for us.
Yeah, I'm going to ask Nathan or Roanna to come in and deal with those, please.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. I'll let Roanna just clarify the capacities there. The current reasoning we've come to those capacities is we're working obviously to the fire. We've had a fire consultant work through all of the spaces, and I think you've got their report in the information, and that's how we've come to the numbers that we've got. But Roanna will give you the exact numbers for each space.
Thank you.
Yeah, the capacity for the pub area is 384. The capacity for the larger restaurant unit is 266, and the capacity for the small restaurant is 60 persons.
Can you just repeat that last one?
60 persons for the smaller restaurant.
Okay, so the 266 for one of the restaurants and 60 for the other. So that's a big restaurant for 266 people. I mean, obviously with COVID, will that make a difference if you're going to have a meter between each table? And does that affect the capacity? Because I think we need to talk about this a little bit, just to find out, roughly how many people actually will possibly be in that area.
Councillor Smith, don't forget to ask about the cocktail bar. Is that separate to the restaurant?
Yeah, I'm just focusing on Unit A for the moment, just for a minute, because otherwise it gets a little bit complicated. If we just let's focus on A for a second and just speak about the kind of COVID regulations that have come in and how that might affect, how you think that may affect the business.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Yes, 100%. You're 100% right. Those capacities will be massively reduced during the period where COVID guidance applies. Just to speak to this, we are not planning on opening any of these public facing areas until April 21. So we are opening all of the workspace and the offices and the the local convenience store. We're starting the site, and our mitigation for in initial phase for COVID is not to have the public on site for food and beverage at this point. We really have taken we're taking the impact on the financial model by not opening it until April next year, because we want to mitigate the risk of COVID to the wider community in the area.
Okay, great. And just on the pub, because obviously we don't know what's going to happen April next year. We might have had a vaccine by then, so that would change things again. But just on the pub, can you speak about the pub? Because the pub's 384. That's an awful lot of people to be drinking. Could you just speak to that a little bit about how COVID's going to affect that as well?
It would be the same, exactly the same scenario in terms of reduced capacities. We, as the license holder, would enforce upon our tenants the capacities, operational capacity. So one of the things that has worked extremely well at our other projects is we hold the license and we are accountable as the overall site owner or sort of interim landlord to the licensing authority. That means in our lease we enforce an operations manual which allows us from time to time to update that and enforce policies that we feel are in the best interest of the site. And if the tenants are not taking note of those policies, then they're in breach of their lease. So it's supplementary document to their lease. So we have maintained strict control across both of our current sites, and we will seek to do so here. So effectively, it actually makes licensing the licensing authority's job a hell of a lot easier. And we did discuss this at length with David. Who, correct me if I'm wrong, David, was of the same opinion that it makes your job easy. You've got one point of contact, one DPS, and one body to contact for all of these tenants.
Yeah. Did I note in the papers that there was going to be a sports kind of dimension, a kind of pub sports sort of dimension to Unit A? Are you planning to show football and stuff in there?
We don't know what tenant we're getting in there as yet, so we're not precluding that element. However, we have spoken to Dave, and we already have conditions in there around serving plastics before and after any matches. Whether or not they are showing football, they will still be obviously impacted by the fact that West Ham home games are played in the area. So there are conditions that have already been agreed, and especially with the police, that will be impact on all of these premises.
Yeah. Okay. So final question then on Unit A, Chair, if that's okay. I don't want to dominate. Is that okay, Chair?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Just back to the pub again. I mean, feasibly, how many people? I know it's hard for you to say, but how many people might you expect to get in there? I mean, 384 seemed that's a big venue. Any ideas?
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Yes, we are being guided by the as you're aware, by the fire capacities. We will be working with the tenants that go in there because we're providing the space as shell and core. So it's a an empty space at the moment. They will have to fit it out with a bar and a cellar and all of this. So we will be again enforcing a capacity once we have the operator and work with the operator on the fit out.
Yeah.
That is reasonable, and we believe that we can enforce all of the conditionality of the license on them. And obviously they will have the license attached to their leases, so that any breach thereof will be a breach of the lease.
I'm surprised that you haven't done an assessment of how many kind of tables you can get in there at 1 meter apart already, just to find out roughly. That's important, isn't it, for your business plan under these new COVID regulations, because you need to have social distancing there. I'm surprised you haven't got a rough idea.
We have looked at it, but as I said, that our mitigation strategy at the moment is to open in April. So we are not planning on having any of this open until April next year, by which time we're of the firm opinion at the moment that these guidance regulations will be lifted. As if we get to sort of the November, December, and it doesn't look like they're going to, then that's obviously work that we have to undertake.
So Unit A will not be functioning at all until April 21?
Definitely not.
Okay, well, that's good. Chair, do you want to come in and because we can speak about B now and stuff, but that's within core hours, so maybe it's not as kind of controversial. Do you want to go on to C maybe? Or?
Yeah, do that.
I mean, C strikes me, obviously the hours are longer there, and I'm kind of struggling really to work out why you want a cocktail bar to go on to is it 2 o'clock, I think, or something? That's yeah, 1:30. And as the local councillors have mentioned core hours, and Mr. Grant, you have talked about the core hours and how you need those extra hours to sort of make the business work and pay for the supplementary affordable space for the community, which obviously is a great thing. That's something I'd like to speak about as well, as how affordable they will be. I mean, is there any room for manoeuvre at all? I know you've been through this already, but is there any room for manoeuvre on the hours in regards to Unit C? Mr. Grant.
Well, I'd have to take instructions on it. I mean, we've already moved in response.
I realise that.
To the representations of police and environmental health. So that was the moving. The point is, any more you cut into those hours in Event C, it reduces the amount we can offer the community.
Mm.
Unfortunately, it's a simple economical trade-off. The hours before you now are the sweet spot. That's when we can provide everything we want to for the community, but still make it financially viable.
Yeah.
So can hours go down? Well, they can, but then there'll be less for the community, is the simple answer.
Can I just check what was said earlier? Did we get it confirmed that there'd be 60 persons in a cocktail bar?
I think that's right. What I'm going to suggest, and I haven't been able to take instructions yet, but Nathan, would you be in a position to agree a capacity limit for the cocktail bar of 60 customers?
100%. Yes, we as I said, we've been guided by the fire strategy, and that's been professionally done by a third-party consultant. So we would want to keep everything in line with that.
So perhaps I could suggest a condition.
Because clearly that's a particular concern, because it's the latest of all the sites.
Yeah.
And if we know it's not going to be used all the time by its full capacity, but only some nights to cocktail bar capacity, that would be a bit of reassurance.
Could I perhaps suggest a condition for you to consider, and that's that in the cocktail bar area of Block C, there shall be a maximum capacity of 60 customers. So it doesn't include staff.
Yes, okay. Councillor Smith, do you have anything else on Block C?
Well, can I just speak about Unit B for a second?
Yeah.
I think we're finished with C, aren't we? I think we maybe got what we want to get to with that one. Yeah, so Unit B, 849. It's going to be a food hall. I mean, again, there's a lot of people, and that's an awful lot of food to be feeding 800 odd people. Can we just speak to that idea of your business plan as well in regards to the food hall in Block B?
Sure. Thank you for a good question there, Councillor. The idea with Block B is very similar to, I'm not sure if any of you have been to the Truman Brewery, where they have the food hall and the market, or any of these sort of venues. But the idea is we're having 13 local traders who have semi-permanent kiosks in there. They'll all be able to sell food and drink. There will be a mezzanine on the inside that block, which is a capacity of 120 up the top. So there'll be lots of seating available for everybody to eat and drink. And then obviously there is furniture in the main courtyard as well. So the idea is it's semi-permeable and people will be able to come in and out with their food.
Okay, great. We haven't started talking about the smoking areas yet. That's another issue we'd like to kind of talk about, Chair, if that's okay.
I think one of my concerns on that was the way in which the first block is set up, and the 3 separate smoking areas referred to becomes very complex to police. But it may well be there's little we can do to affect the architecture of the development at this stage.
Yes, actually, those quite complex smoking area conditions, and how many people are in what area, for a seating area, for a smoking area, depending on the time, those have been very carefully worked out by your officers, and we adopted their proposals.
I think that's the answer I didn't want to hear, but yeah. Councillor Storman, can I bring you back in at this point? Have you heard anything that's reassured you at all?
I'm glad to see that there is some flexibility. It's the best I can say. So I appreciate there is an effort being made to recognise our concerns.
Are there particular further matters you would like to see addressed?
No, I think I've tried to explain our worries. I would ask though that this enterprise does seriously involve us as local councillors in it, and coming late into this, I just think, is a worrying indication that they just want to get things through to maximise their revenues, rather than really think seriously about addressing the needs of the local community. So a plea to them, please use this as an opportunity to establish a good ongoing relationship with local councillors.
Okay, thank you. I think you've been heard on that point. Yes, everybody nod your head. All right. Gilbert,
okay, come in.
Yeah.
Yeah. I noticed also in the documentation that this is a sort of there's a temporary nature to this whole development. Am I right in saying that, Mr. Grant?
It depends how you define. Yes, it's a meanwhile project. So I think originally COVID has somewhat interfered. I think you're now looking at about a decade. Is that right, Nathan?
Well, the lease term is 12 years, but depending on how the development goes across the rest of Eastwick and Sweetwater, there might be malleability there with regard to the term, simply because of the COVID impact.
Yeah, and just on the market rents for the affordable space, because I think this is a very important issue. You say that it's kind of lower than market rent. Do you have any indication, of a percentage that you might be offering? And I note that some of the space is free as well in Block C. Can you just discuss some of those issues, because that would help us to work out, what you actually are doing for the community?
Of course, yeah, no problem. We'll start with the event space in Block C. So what we currently do with both of our event spaces at Pop, Brixton and Peckham levels is 25% of the time the operator has to make that available for free community use. So at Pop and Lambeth, we engage with age training. So we
Can I just stop you there 1 second? In terms of the time, what times are we talking about here?
So they're
9
very
to 5, or 9
No,
to 12?
we're talking. We run the events throughout the licensable hours. So
Okay.
it depends on what event needs to be run and what the operator has booked in. So we have a in the operator's lease, we have conditionality that they have to make this available, and they work with our operations team. So people will apply, and we have what's called a steering group, which is made up of our site general manager. It's made up of a representative from the local council. There's a gentleman called Matteo Rogers who sits on that board. It's made up of someone from Eastwick and Sweetwater and someone from LLDC. And
sorry, can I just stop you there just very briefly? Councillor Sharman, would you be happy to be part of that steering group?
I mean, Matthew Rogers, that has just been talked about, is certainly we're happy with him as a representative, but I think anything that encourages local councillors to be part of this would be a positive in view of the fact that we don't seem to be part of the dialogue up to now. So in answer to your question, Gilbert, yes.
Thank you.
So yeah, just to clarify, Matteo has been working with us on this for the last year and a half. So he's been formally appointed about 6 months ago. So just so you're aware, maybe that hasn't been communicated to you, Nick, but we are definitely keen for you and your team, or any of the councillors who want to be a part of this, to be a part of it. So as I was saying, we are currently recruiting community leaders as well, because there'll be a total of 8 people that sit on that, and that board will make decisions on who gets access to the 25% of the time free space in Block C, and also who gets access to the affordable rent spaces that we are providing from £8 a square foot across the office / light industrial and maker spaces. So we are fully embedded, and all of the applications are reviewed by that steering group. In fact, Matteo and the team reviewed the first batch of a supported space last week, and we're extremely happy with the applications.
And with that steering group, would that be meeting once a week, or just whenever, once a month? I mean, how often would you meet?
Quarterly, I believe, at this stage is the initial phase, and then they will themselves understand what the requirement is going forward. But for the first 12 months, it's quarterly.
And do you find that the quarterly works in the other places you've got going?
Very well, yes. We even scale it back slightly due to people's commitments over time. So 6 monthly in Lambeth. However, we do call meetings every so often, depending on the requirements.
Councillor Smith, I think we're in danger of going outside matters.
Yeah.
But I want a discussion that gives us a flavour of the operation.
Yeah.
Without going into too much detail about.
Sorry.
Councillor Smith, sorry, I'd be happy to take this offline and give you some more information if you wanted my contact details.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I've got a good idea. Thank you very much.
Okay, Amanda, if I can come to you for a second. Are there any matters you think we should have asked about that we haven't? It's okay to say no.
Yeah, no, I haven't got anything else. No, I think you've covered. I think Councillor Smith has been covering the points and going through everything clearly. I think just making sure then that you're happy that you have enough information to make a decision about the hours that are proposed, the amended hours for A and C.
Chair, I just do have one other area just to discuss very briefly. Sorry. Just on the transport stuff. The times of the trains, I believe, at Hackney Wick, Councillor Sharman, you might be able to correct me on this, stop around about 12:50 or so. The tubes, not sure about Stratford and the Jubilee line, that goes on all night, I believe. And the buses. Councillor Sharman, can I just ask you about the buses around that area, late night buses in particular? Is there a night bus that goes through there?
I believe there's one night bus that goes through that. I've never used it myself, so I couldn't tell you where it goes and how often it comes. But a night bus is not a way to pick up lots and lots of people that we've heard will come out. So I think it can only be a part of any solution.
Yeah, and do you know what time the tubes stop at Hackney Wick station?
I think you're broadly right. I think
Yeah.
it's 12:30, 1:15, that sort of time.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
I think that's right, Councillor. Simply for your note, there's a travel plan in the supplementary papers.
Yeah, I have seen that, but it doesn't mention late night buses and it doesn't mention the last train times.
Yes. Anyway.
Well, it was an attempt to, but my problem with this is you submitted this plan, which is fine, but is it entirely realistic given the numbers of people we're talking about? Are they really going to walk as far as Stratford Station, or is the area just going to be swamped by Ubers or whatever the equivalent in the future is?
Thank you, Chair, for your question there. I just wanted to maybe give you a little bit more detail on some of the research you've done. There is a proposal currently for Hackney Wick Overground to go 24 hours in the future. So coupled with, in our planning document, as Gary cited before, we work and we do currently work with our other projects with minicab firms to create and make sure that there are an allotment of taxis ready for people as they come out. I mean, that they need to go that way anyway if they're going past the copper box to what would be the taxi rank, and then obviously the Jubilee line is 24 hours.
Okay, I'm not entirely convinced, but there's we cannot generate additional public transport by way of a licensing decision, so I'm not going to pursue it too much further.
What about safety and so on through this dispersal time, or are they going to have the guards there on particular nights, to make sure?
We heard the suggestion of street marshals, and I'm certain we will take that condition.
Yeah.
What else are you intending to do to make sure it's safe and around the environment of the 3 blocks?
There's on each of the blocks, there's a minimum SIA requirement within the conditions. So in Block A, for example, you'll find condition 4 of Block A, a minimum of 2 door supervisors, Thursday, Friday, Saturdays from 9 p.m. until 30 minutes after closing. For Block B, that's at page 8 of the supplemental. That's a risk assess, because that's the food hall. So SIA is on risk assess basis.
So no minimum, so some nights, none at all.
I mean, it's a food hall. So food halls, I'll ask Nathan, do you plan to have in the food hall SIA there all the time?
So no, we don't plan on having in the food hall. We have them in both of the other buildings, and obviously they, if required, they would cover the Block B. But the food hall we see as the sort of more family orientated area.
And Councillor, just to add on to that, Block C, the condition in Block C, that's the event space.
Yeah.
And bar is a minimum of 4 door supervisors. And at least 1 per 100 customers from 9 p.m. until 30 minutes after close, Thursday to Saturday. So those are all the late nights. And that's condition 4. So there's going to be a considerable number of SIA across the 3 blocks. So in the highly unlikely of circumstances that a bun fight starts in the food hall, there will be SIA very close by who can resolve it.
Well, that's not quite accurate, because the guaranteed SIAs are only Thursday to Saturday.
Yes, that's as a minimum, yes.
Other nights, there may be none.
At other times, risk assessed. I think it's highly unlikely. I mean, for example, if you were to have the local Women's Institute having an event in the evening, it may be that a decision is made, you probably don't require an SIA. But if you have a minimum on those nights, that would mean you'd have to have an SIA hanging around.
I think women's are unlikely to book the pub for the night.
That's the event space on C. Yes, Nathan.
Could I just say, excuse me, Councillor, we did go through and we walked around with the police in depth. So there was 4 all licensing police licensing officers, and went through this in detail with them. And this is the conditionality that the conditionality that they proposed. So we're pretty confident that you know, we've got it right, because all of the advice has come from them.
Okay. I'll move towards closing remarks then, because I think we've explored what we need to. Mr. Grant, you have first make a remark. Do you want to make any closing remarks?
Yes, simply this. The clients have moved on hours from the original application in reference to the experts. All of your experts who look after crime and disorder and public nuisance, we have deferred to everything they've proposed, and that's what's before you now by way of conditions. But in addition to that, we have offered in this hearing, and it's been a useful exercise, a doubling of the minimum number of street marshals, so a minimum of the 2 street marshals on the Friday, Saturday nights. And we have capped the capacity of the cocktail bar to 60 people. Now, it might be throughout this entire application, the one aspect that perhaps is always gives rise to the most concern is you've got hundreds of vertical drinkers into the early hours. With that capacity condition, it cannot happen, because you have a cap of 60, which is effectively a very small drinking establishment among a huge area. One thing I do want to emphasize, and it's perhaps been a bit lost within a license application, we today, of course, only talk about the licensable activities. That's why we're here. But that's got to be seen in the context of a much wider scheme, which is overwhelmingly there for workplaces, for the community. The rest of it, in effect, is subsidiary to that, and it pays for the rest. So the focus of a licensing hearing is on the license parts. Please don't lose sight of the overall scheme that's described in the presentation within your additional papers.
Okay, I was going to run through some of the additional conditions we might have taken. You've helpfully covered off 2 that we'll almost certainly consider, one about street marshals and one about capacity. The other one I mentioned earlier is we really want all licensable activities to stop at the same time. It makes it much easier for enforcement. So we can get a little bit of refreshment at the same time as alcohol service.
We will forego the coffees and teas and agree that all licensable activities end half an hour before closing time.
Otherwise, it becomes difficult to enforce if you're still allowed to serve teas and coffees, but not other drinks. Mr. Tuitt, do you want to say anything?
It's more just very briefly, just to check with on the capacities. I'm assuming that those are the absolute maximums with the premises as they are now in sort of shell condition. Is it fair to say that?
Yes, is the answer.
Yeah, so as this scheme develops further, I would expect maybe in the future some plans and drawings, etc., to be substituted. So that may lead to reduced capacities if that's a concern for members as they make their consideration of this application when they retire.
Okay, well, clearly there are overlapping regimes covering the capacity. There's planning, there's the fire authority's role, and there's ours. And we've got a specific condition.
Yeah.
It caused the most licensing terms because it was open the latest.
Yeah, so I took those numbers on the drawings to be the absolute maximum capacities, but they could be.
Yeah, they certainly are what should be.
Yeah.
Councillor Sharman, your final remarks?
No, I'm happy with the way discussion's gone. Thank you.
Councillor Smith, any final clarifications?
Yeah, I suppose, the big risk here, the food hall, 849 people is a lot of people. I suppose my big issue is the pub really at Unit A and the capacity of 384. I know that might go down with COVID and stuff, but I think, and the idea of playing sports, football, and people getting a bit leery and late at night. So I suppose it's just the pub really. I just need a little bit more reassurance in the pub on Unit A, if that's all right.
Can I address you before I hand you over to Nathan?
Yeah.
My team are on a WhatsApp group, and I'm receiving dozens of frantic texts from Mr. Andrew Atkins, who's of course the residential landlord, making the very good point. It's his residence. He's going to have hundreds of residents there. And it is part of the service level agreements that we firstly cannot start taking on tenants who are going to undermine the whole purpose of this major development. So there's already agreements in the lease, for example, that if we start taking on tenants who then cause a nuisance of themselves, we can end up forfeiting the lease. So they've got to be really careful who they curate to take on these premises. So to take an example out of nowhere, if you have a really dodgy sports bar operator with a reputation for causing havoc, we're not going to take them on as tenants. So you're not going to have that. And it's not just me saying this now. If you go to Pop Brixton, if you go to Peckham Levels and see who they take on, they are really responsible. They have to be independent operators. 70% of those operators are locals. So you're not going to have the huge mass companies coming in here. These are going to be responsible, ambitious, local, often young people taking them on.
Okay, thank you.
Whatever Mr. Atkins is texting you about, he is not the applicant here. Yeah, his company isn't.
No.
Yeah, we have to set the license conditions that could exist if there was a complete breakdown between the two parties you're referring to. If they were in dispute, we still have to have robust licensing conditions that can apply purely within the licensing arena.
I appreciate that.
Councillor, anything else that was raised you need clarification on?
Oh, that's it. Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone.
Okay, Amanda?
No, sorry, I didn't have anything. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, as I said before in the last application, what we have to do now is adjourn and have our discussion. However, I think given that it's highly likely that with the additional conditions that we might look favourably towards this one. We're always keen to encourage local businesses to thrive. So we wish you well and you'll get a formal decision in due course.
Thank you. Councillor, could I just confirm, would the email be, so the decision be emailed out to the parties?
In the very first instance, it'll be published as a decision on our committee part of our website. So look for our meetings part.
All right.
It'll appear on there as a printed decision first. And after that, it will go out to you in email form and in letter form. We hope to do that within 5 working days, but you certainly the electronic form of decision should be within 2 days, we would hope.
Thank you. And thank you for convening this hearing remotely.
Okay, thank you. If you could also leave, please.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Right. Thank you very much.
Andy Newman, clear off.
Thank you. Thank you, Joel. So I'm trying to. Where's this?